Welcome back, everyone. It's your old coffin dodger here again. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is July 10th, 2020, and it's a couple of weeks now since the last podcast, which I titled Rip Off the Mask. And I hope you enjoyed it. I will be referring back to it a couple of times during this podcast, I'm sure, because it is kind of related. This one is focusing a little bit more on the second ritual, which is the washing of the hands. And I saw somebody noted somewhere that ripping off the mask was to be compared now to women ripping off their bra when they come home from an event or when they come home from work, just to be free again, just rip it off and feel free. So I hope you liked that podcast and that you took note of some of the things that were said there. Some of them were somebody else's words, but they were my sentiments. And today I'm going to kind of follow up on that with more ritual stuff, talking about rituals, because rituals are very important in people's lives. If you want to give your child a kind of a safe and secure childhood, you will create rituals with them. The getting up in the morning, the hug before breakfast, or even hopping into the bed with you and for a cuddle before they get up, and the good night story, the maybe leaving the door open, mommy, kind of thing, the kiss before they go to school. Some people even do a spiritual exercise with their children. They light a little candle, and especially those who are preparing for sacraments, they light a little candle with their children. They say a prayer. They talk about what they are preparing for, and this way they create rituals in the home. And if these rituals are disturbed, or if something happens that they cannot be performed, the child starts to question it and is unsettled and just wondering what's wrong now with mommy or daddy today. They're not going to do this with me, or why are they not doing this? Do they not love me anymore? And you see where I'm getting, because in Germany, where I lived, we used to call the state Vaterstaat. And I don't know if it's different here in Ireland. Maybe they call it the mother state, or the daddy state. I don't know. But it has to do with what I'm just after saying. We put all our faith in our governments, in our state, that they are the ones who are doing good by us. And when they create rituals, we feel happy, we feel loved. And when they are reinforced daily, hourly, quarter hourly, on the radio and on the television, and that makes us feel even safer. And we know that our government is looking out for us and that they want us to be safe and happy. While at the same time, I personally would be asking myself about the sick people at home, the ones who are not being looked after and who are being neglected, and who have been cancelled in the hospitals several times. Their appointments have been cancelled because of this ritual that we are carrying out for no good reason, really. In the meantime, it has become a ritual. So today I'm going to follow up on the mask ritual that I spoke about. You might want to refer back to that again. But I'm going to talk a little bit about hand washing today. And fairly early on in this lockdown situation, I was thinking of the poor people who have compulsive disorders, and I was thinking about these people who wash their hands repeatedly from morning till night. They just have this feeling that they're not clean, and they keep going back to wash their hands, and especially after they've touched something that they deem to be unclean, they have to go back and wash their hands again. And sure enough, I found an article pertaining to that online, and it spoke about or talked about or wrote about the fact that many of these OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder patients or people have reverted to the old habits of washing their hands over and over again after they had made huge progress in not doing it, because now their fears and their anxieties have been triggered again and reawakened, so that they're now back to where they began, going to a therapist and learning how to deal with these compulsive thoughts and actions. So that is one downside, a big downside of this repetitive message we are getting about washing our hands all the time. And it has to do with parents as well. Now, those of you who have worked in psychology or do have anything to do with psychology will know about transference, and that when we react strongly to something that somebody says, it's not exactly what the person has said, but it's the memory of somebody else having said it and having been punished and not having had a good experience that is triggered. That's called transference. That you see somebody maybe that looks like your wicked uncle, and this may be a perfectly lovely person, but physically they look like your wicked uncle, and you really go for their throats because now you can. That's called transference. So what is happening now in society is that we have these parents, the daddy state, the mommy state, ordering us or telling us to do things. So you're either a happy person who are used to obeying orders from your parents, and that you have become conditioned to do that, or you rebel, which you may have done with your own parents when they told you what to do and what not to do, or indeed you may be happy with the rituals that you experienced in your own home, and that these new rituals that we are now performing, they give you that kind of feeling of safety and being looked after and being loved. And as long as there's no change in the routine, you're quite happy to go along with it. Remember I told you last time about the fourth industrial revolution? That is the period we are now experiencing. The Internet of Things would be another expression used when talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and it's about transforming society and transforming the way of working, of living, of every area of life, basically. Social, spiritual, economic and political. You might also remember that I spoke in an earlier podcast. You can look them up. I think it's usually in the description box what I was talking about. But the empire of the city is one thing I spoke about, that there are 3 city-states, which are the Vatican City, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. And these 3 cities, they rule the 3 most important things in life, or in our lives, which is the money, the military, and the religion. And in turn, these 3 areas, are controlled by the elite. We call them the elite, but we mean the 13 ruling bloodlines. These are people and families who go back centuries, and they claim for themselves the right to determine just about everything in their area of expertise. Many of them are in politics, as we know. We talked about that, or other people talk about that all the time. And some are in the banking business. Others determine the religious direction. And at the moment we are in a phase where we are thinking fraternity, we are thinking humanism, we are thinking, as I said, sanitizing our hands instead of blessing ourselves, and religion is going in a completely different direction than I think was intended when we read our Bible, because God said to us, or Jesus said, we are the temple of the living God. And God said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. He said that in Corinthians. But we have people in power, even in the church, who consider themselves superior to God himself. They consider themselves that they know more than God, and that his promises to us that we could walk over snakes and scorpions without being harmed, they do not represent that. They want us to believe that a little virus can kill us. Of course it can, but it's always God's will when we die. It's never determined by somebody else. You cannot lengthen your life by 1 second if God doesn't want that to happen and doesn't empower the physician or whoever is looking after you to lengthen your life. So it's a good thing to adhere to the rules of modern medicine, but it's kind of overdoing things when it becomes a powerful ritual which is inflicted upon you day and night. So, and when we look at our newspapers and at the things that we are presented with every day, that is politics, education, economics, and religion. So when we look at politics, we are now looking at a complete turnabout from decency to depravity. When we look at education, we look at depravity and indoctrination. When we look at economics, we see debt. We see economic slavery. We see people with no money at all. And we see poverty. When we look at religion, we see a total transformation of everything we knew until now. We see people who we thought stood for Christ, they now stand for something completely different. They now tell us that the government is wiser than God. They now tell us that the Bible has become secondary to the COVID rules and regulations. They now tell us that to sanitize our hands is more important than to remember our baptism upon entering a church. The cleansing of our souls is not as important anymore. It is now the cleansing of the body that has become a priority. It has become more important than our soul. They suggest to us that a government who brought us 6,666 abortions since the enactment of the abortion law are able to look after us, are willing and interested in our well-being. How on earth could we believe that? How on earth can we believe politicians who canvassed our votes with a promise to protect life, and shortly after they became ministers, they turned around and promoted abortion? How can we believe a leader, a doctor, who claimed that abortion was no solution, that it took a life, took a child's life. How can we believe a man who turned around as soon as he became a minister and began to promote abortion? Do you really think that these people are interested in your health? Do you think that these people who have neglected, who have a health system that is not fit for purpose, it is so behind other civilized countries? So there's a huge transformation going on, and these rituals that I spoke about initially and that I'm talking about today, they are helping to complete this transformation, which, as I said before, we were cocooning. The word cocooning went on for a long time, which meant that in the cocooning stage, we were in the caterpillar stage. We hadn't evolved yet to the new creature which comes out of the caterpillar. So we're talking anyway about these rituals, which is the mask wearing, the hand washing, the distancing, and the lockdowns. And today we're talking about the washing. And what I was thinking as well, and what just came to mind, is baptism has to do with transformation. The old person is washed away in the waters of baptism, and the new person emerges in Christ. But now we have hand washing, ritual hand washing, which is supposed to transform us into clean beings, germ-free beings, virus-free entities. And instead of blessing ourselves in the baptismal water, because the water we bless ourselves with when we go into church is the water that is blessed for baptisms throughout the coming year. It's blessed at Easter time, it's used for baptisms, and it's also used for us to bless ourselves when we enter the church and to remind us of our baptism. But now we have, when we come into the church, we have hand sanitizers. See, we clean our hands, but this is a carnal thing. It has nothing to do with our baptism anymore. It is now trying to sanitize the body so that it can live longer on earth, if you know what I mean. Eternal life on earth kind of thing we can achieve by using the hand sanitizer. Water, which is one of the four elements, water, fire, earth and air. Water has always been a symbol of life itself, because a large portion of our bodies is made up of water, and because nothing can live without water, not to mention the fish that is not able to survive without being in the water. But it's also, as I just said, a symbol of birth. It reminds us of the fluids that accompany birth. You say the waters broke and the child was born. And it's used in other religions as symbolic cleansing. It's used in Jewish rituals or practices to wash the hands when they wake up in the morning. They take a cup of water and they pour it over one hand, and then they take the cup and pour it over the other hand. So they might do that as well, even 3 times, because it's an anointing of the hand, and it's a symbol of the renewal of creation, as well as a spiritual cleansing in preparation for the work of the new day. So that is somewhere else where this cleansing and washing has a deep spiritual significance. Then, of course, we know that in the Islamic world that ritual cleansing is also practiced, and sometimes it's just the washing of the hands and of the forearms. But say that a Muslim comes in contact with a an undesirable creature like a dog. This is why Muslims just avoid dogs and do not like dogs. When they come in contact with a dog, they are obliged to take a full bath, take off all their clothes and have a full bath before the next prayer in the mosque. That's why there are baths always provided. Just before Muslims go to prayer, they are obliged to wash their hands and as I said, to take a full bath if they've touched something that is unclean. And interestingly, the first mention of cleansing is mentioned in the Old Testament when God commands Aaron and his sons to wash their hands and feet before even stepping foot inside the tent of meeting, let alone making an offering without washing their hands. Now, there's something that I hadn't thought about before, but it has now come to mind as I have been speaking and kind of mentally delving into this topic. And I was wondering, why do we sanitize or have to sanitize our hands before entering shops? Why is it that we have to cleanse ourselves? Because they're not places of worship. God does not reside in them unless we carry Jesus with us into these places. They are temples of money. They are golden calves. I mean, the whole cleansing business just doesn't add up in a shop or in a supermarket, because you clean your hands, sanitize your hands when you come in, and then you touch objects, and then you touch another object, and then somebody after you touches the same object and touches another object. So to be really efficient, you would have to sanitize your hands after everything you touch. So it does not really make any sense at all, unless it is to get us accustomed to something, to get us initiated into getting the feeling that we are worthy to enter that shop, to enter that place. And many of us are aware that not only are we being groomed to accept everything else that the New World Order will require us to fulfill and to do and to obey in the future, they also require us to be worthy of stepping into a facility that they control. So that would be the sanitizing before you go into the shop. In times to come, you won't be able to enter the shop without having a clean record, without your social credits being up to par, without having the means to pay for your things. So it could well be that the initiation of this cleansing before entering the supermarket could well be a practice in becoming worthy to buy and sell. I don't know what you think about that, but let me know. So, and elsewhere I read very wise words. It's about ritual as well. Ritual facilitates the mechanics of change through specific mechanisms, a rhythm to sync to merge and flow with, a magnetic drawing one on the path towards transmutation. There we have it again, the transformation. We are being transformed from the third industrial revolution into the fourth. We are being transformed into leaving behind the old ways of life that we knew into new ways of life and living, new religion, new economics, new governments. And the rituals are vehicles which drive home these ideas, the information, the data, the symbols, which upon transmission create the language by which new society members communicate after they are initiated. For example, at the beginning when everyone was talking about social distancing, it was such a buzzword. It was so disgusting that it wasn't there one day and everybody was using it the next day as if they knew what they were talking about. And the cocooning, that was another word that somebody rang me up, or I rang somebody up, and they said, "Oh, I thought you'd be cocooning." I said, "What do you mean cocooning? What is that?" These were words that just didn't exist until they, all of a sudden, in all of the countries, in every country on the globe, people were using the same expressions. So this is just not coincidence. And this is not a way of dealing with a virus in a country. I mean, people are saying this comes from the WHO, but our government pretends that it comes from them and that they have been in meeting after meeting to find ways for us to be safe. Be safe. Be safe. Take care. Together, apart, or apart together. all these new expressions, but they do nothing. They just get a script from somewhere and read it out to us in their own words. Something like I'm doing here now, that sometimes I read out pieces that I've read and that I find significant and apply to what I am doing. And sometimes I tell you that I'm doing that, but sometimes you might not know the difference. But it says here as well, note that ritual isn't always a conscious action. Not everyone partaking in a ritual is made explicitly aware that they are participants, and yet still new patterns of thoughts of significance are drummed in, conscious or not, of the ritual in which the initiate is partaking. So this is something that I've always talked about, is what certain words and certain actions and certain pictures do to the mind. They create new pathways. That's a neurological fact, that say you are being abused, or that you are being abused, and that you're listening to something constantly. That affects your mind, even if you don't want to hear it, if you try to keep it out, keep it away, not listen to it, it does create new pathways. So all the more these advertisements, these pictures, these images, these suggestions that we are bombarded with from morning to night are going to create new pathways, whether we like it or not. And do you know what the first stage of this initiation ritual was? It was the isolation, the cocooning. And the isolation, staying home, was for purification. And at this stage, the initiate is separated from the mundane. Did you know that mundane literally means of the world? And we Christians know that we are in the world, but we are not of the world. So in essence, in this isolation initiation, we were taken out of the world to be not of the world, just as we Christians were taken out of the world through our baptism initiation into Christianity, into the Christian community. Here we were initiated into a totally different system, a system which has a religion that is subservient to the government and no longer recognizes the sovereignty of Jesus Christ and each one of us as being sovereign under God. That's a denial. It's a denial of Jesus. Every time we go into a church, use a hand sanitizer, have to use a hand sanitizer, have to wear a mask, and have to social distance, that is denying Jesus. That is denying the power of the risen Christ in favour of government rules, which come from Satan. The initiate is largely removed from the otherwise familiar persons, places, and things that they're used to in order to be cleared of them. Clearing, that is a word that is used in Scientology a lot with their brainwashing. They do these brainwashing sessions to clear you, to clear your mind. And an initiate is forced to become detached and insulated, purged and purified. Does that sound familiar? An essential element of this separation from one's typical environment is the suspension of the normal rules of living that one is used to, the normal way. Most of the initiate's senses will become commanded and regulated at this time. In other words, the majority of what the initiate sees, hears, smells, touches, and tastes is deliberately controlled. All we have to do really is to think of prisons. When we want to punish somebody who has committed crimes against society and against other people, they end up in prison. And most of us want them to end up there and hope that they will get a prison sentence. But what really do we mean when we wish them years and years in prison, that they're locked up? I'm not sure that we really know what we wish for them. But the fact is that these people are separated from participating in normal everyday life. They cannot get up when they fancy it. They cannot go out when they fancy it. They cannot do anything when they feel like it. They have to ask for permission and quietly wait, patiently wait for a response. And they may have to apply several times for a freedom. And within this prison system then, the prisoners do interact with one another at certain times. They have freedom times where they're let out in a certain area, and they're not allowed in all areas where they feel like it, but they have a designated area where they can get fresh air, where they can play games and carry out their sports and whatever they might be interested in a very small scale kind of way. But then again, if one of these prisoners is very hard to manage, if they're obnoxious, if they're causing difficulties, if they're threatening to somebody, as they will be punished even more. They will be put in isolation where there's even less freedom. They may even be no light, they may be put in darkness for 24 hours. And that is called sensory deprivation. And in prison itself, there is a certain amount of sensory deprivation because the prisoners don't get to experience the sun when they want it. They don't get to experience anything that has to do with the five senses: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. All these senses are deprived in a prison. And they're deprived even more in isolation. So this is much like the situation of being in lockdown. We are deprived of so much in the lockdown, or we were deprived of so much in the lockdown. There are so many sensual experiences that were denied to us, like a prisoner And if we did feel like a prisoner, we were prisoners. We were not allowed. We are under the threat of the law, under threat of punishment. We were told to stay at home. And I think most people would even have complied if we were respected as citizens and we were told, please stay at home, and if we had seen that it was terribly dangerous to be out and about, because every time we'd go out and sniff, somebody would drop dead. We have become killers just by going out when we're not supposed to. That's a very, very bad place to be, and it's a very bad feeling to be conveying to people that they are responsible for the deaths of other people just by disobeying a law, a man-made rule, where there is no evidence to show that my going out in public as a healthy person is going to kill somebody. But that's what they're suggesting, and that is why we were locked away. So we were locked away, deprived of sensual experiences for a number of weeks and up to months, to transition to a new compliant person, much like what we expect from our prisoners. When we put them in prison, we expect them to come out again a new being with a new attitude towards life, grateful to be alive, grateful to be part of society again, and completely compliant. And many people who were in isolation and who obeyed down to the last iota, who are going around with masks and washing their hands repeatedly and hand sanitizing, and they are sacrificing, they are bringing sacrifice to Baal, to a new world order, to a world government, showing them that they are compliant, they are giving up their freedoms, they are making sacrifices to this God in order to save other people. This is a ritual, and this saving lives agenda also is related to the saving Mother Earth. We're told now that we are in the 6th mass extinction era of mass extinction. And the last phase was 40 million years ago, about. But nobody has told me yet what caused the last extinction. They have certain names, and I mentioned them in one of the last podcasts. But now we're in this phase of mass extinction. Hence, we have Greta with her Extinction Rebellion groups, which nobody ever told us were related to this mass extinction. But this saving of lives can be transferred over to the saving of the planet, saving of Mother Earth, Gaia worship, in other words. And where else have we heard about this washing of the hands? Those of us who know our Bible, or at least parts of it, have heard it in relation to Pilate. Pilate washed his hands of Jesus' destiny. He wanted no more part in it, so he washed his hands and he handed Jesus over to the Sanhedrin to do as they wished with him. So you see, this hand-washing business has multiple layers. Just as the layers, if you go to the World Economic Forum website and go to strategic intelligence, you will find a program there that covers just about everything that we are going through. They have already created the multiple steps, the multiple layers of the new society that we are being initiated into. And so the hand washing also has multiple layers. It could well be that we are actually washing away our alignment with Christ, which provides salvation. which means that we are rejecting the gift of salvation and aligning ourselves with Satan, with the New World Order. And we are accepting the punishment which is due to Satan. We are accepting it. And in other words, it is also the occult ritualistic symbol of rejection. Pilate rejected Jesus. Pilate rejected having anything to do with him and handed him over. So what are we doing? Are we symbolically washing away our old life under Christ in willing acceptance to a new life under the new order of the enemy of Jesus? We know and we have experienced how they have killed the church. They're wiping out any symbols of our relationship with Jesus Christ, taking down churches, taking down statues, vandalizing places of worship. These are the antichrists at work, and we align ourselves with them, and we wash our hands of Jesus Christ. Be very careful, my friends, what you are doing and who you're believing in. And I don't know how many of you know how persecuted Christians are in different countries. Ireland is very isolated because it's an island, and we are dependent on the news that our mainstream media feed us. And we don't see news of the persecution of Christians in other countries. Just today, I read about an Indian woman who was stoned. I don't know whether she was stoned or stabbed, but she was ritually killed for being a Christian because she didn't reject her conversion and she refused to reconvert to whatever system she was in before she became a Christian. So she was killed. And that's what they are doing everywhere. And what is being done, Christians, you hear it every day, Christians are being killed. So we're not going into a system of tolerance and of acceptance of all belief systems. There will be one belief system, and some of us are saying this is going to be the Noahide laws. Christianity will disappear. There'll be Noahide laws, or 7 Noahide laws, and we will be required to adhere to them. And believing in Jesus Christ as Saviour, as God, will be blasphemy, and is blasphemy, because it was for blasphemy that Jesus was crucified. It wasn't because he helped people and he healed people. It was because he revealed himself as God. He didn't deny he was God when accused. And that was considered blasphemous. And the penalty for blasphemy was death. And now this New World Order comes along and requires from us that we worship them. And we can get a little glimpse of it when we see that they gather together. They do not wear masks. They do not do the hand-washing rituals. They speak to us from a distance, from a podium, or from an elevated spot, and speak to us, but require us to wear the mask and to keep a distance to each other. But they don't. So we can recognize the intention there, can we not? I think it's about time to shut up for today, to bring this to a conclusion. And I'll just wind up by saying that back then it was the Roman emperor who was God, and he made sure that everybody revered him. So I think this New World Order is going to be no different. We will have to, and we will be forced to comply with everything that they think up for us. And if not, we're going to be severely punished. But there's no need for despair, because there are many people telling you the truth, warning us where this is headed. And this gives you an opportunity to make choices, to choose who you're going to follow and who you're going to obey. Because to obey Jesus is freedom, to obey the one world government, the new world order, is slavery. So I'm going to love you and leave you for now. And I'll be back again soon with a follow-up talking about the social distancing thing, what the significance of that could be.